The road twisted like a lazy serpent through the red-dusted hills of Dustmere Valley, a place where the horizon seemed to yawn endlessly in all directions. The tires of Callie Monroe's beat-up Land Rover kicked up clouds of ochre dust as she crested a ridge, her eyes scanning the expanse of land that had once been ridiculed as Callie's wasteland by nearly everyone she knew. The setting sun painted the valley in hues of burnt orange and rose gold, but beauty didn't make land valuable, or so she'd been told her entire life. At 39, Callie was back in her late grandfather's neglected ranch house, now the sole owner of 900,000 acres of what everyone else believed was a cursed stretch of desert in western Nevada. The land had come to her unexpectedly, bequeathed in a will that surprised her and infuriated her extended family. Her Uncle Roy called it a cruel joke. Her cousins sneered. Even her former partner, Glenn, tried to be realistic about it, urging her to sell it fast. "There's no future in dust and rattlesnakes," he said with a patronizing smile. But Callie couldn't forget the last time she sat with her grandfather, Nathaniel Monroe, just weeks before he died. He'd been thin and pale, but his voice was firm as he handed her an old weathered box, the kind with rusted hinges and a heavy latch. Inside was a leather-bound journal, a compass, and a single, cryptic message on parchment: "What you see is not what's there. This land has secrets. Keep it safe until you understand." At the time, Callie thought it was sentimental nonsense. Her grandfather had always been a man of mystery, an ex-geologist who left academia to live out his days alone on the ranch. He rarely spoke about the land, only ever referring to it as the spine. No one else ever called it that. Everyone just saw sand, failed cattle fences, dried out wells, and endless sun. But Callie wasn't convinced it was worthless. She'd grown up visiting this land every summer, playing near its rugged mesas and climbing its sun-baked ridges. There was something magnetic about it. Not in the romantic sense, but in a way she couldn't explain. Something always felt just beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. The ranch had always been a sore point in the family. It never yielded profit. No crops grew. Water was scarce. Even attempts at solar farming failed due to strange, unexplainable electrical interference. Investors had walked away. Surveyors shook their heads. The only consistent thing was that Grandpa Nathaniel kept paying taxes on the land, substantial ones, every single year without fail, totaling over $80,000 annually. He never tried to sell, not even when offers came in. And they did come in, oddly frequent offers from shell companies offering far above market value. Still, nobody in the family could figure out why he refused. They assumed stubborn pride. But Callie knew her grandfather wasn't a fool, nor a romantic. He wasn't driven by emotion or nostalgia. If he'd held onto the land for 4 decades and paid into it consistently, he had a reason. She intended to find out what that reason was. The first clue came 2 months into her stay, as she began the tedious task of sorting through decades of paperwork stored in the old study. Amid stacks of yellowed invoices and field notes, she found a dusty envelope addressed simply, "To Callie, only if you're serious." Inside were dozens of pages, copies of heavily redacted communications with various federal departments, including the Department of Natural Resources, the Bureau of Geological Anomalies, and even Homeland Infrastructure. One phrase repeated in multiple letters: Zone 3, subsurface anomaly confirmed. Recommendations: secure, contain, do not disclose. Callie's pulse quickened. What anomaly? The second clue arrived uninvited: Uncle Roy. He pulled up in a rented Lexus, brought an expensive bottle of wine, and flashed a smile she hadn't seen since her mother's funeral. "That land's gonna eat you alive, Callie," he said casually, pouring himself a glass without asking. "But I'll make it easy on you. I've got a buyer lined up. Private interest. No fuss. They're offering $6 million, cash." $6 million? From the same man who called the land useless scrub not 2 months ago? Callie politely declined. She didn't need confirmation anymore. She had instinct, and her instincts screamed that something was buried out here, and her grandfather had kept it hidden for a reason. Determined to dig deeper, she contacted an independent geological analyst, a former field engineer named Rafiq Khan, who specialized in electromagnetic anomalies and historical terrain shifts. Together, They reviewed old survey maps, satellite scans, and climate drift data. Rafik grew more intrigued with every scan. He returned to her 2 weeks later, uncharacteristically quiet, and placed his laptop on her kitchen table. There's something below Zone 3. Something artificial. A perfect magnetic spike, aligned with the equinox and solstice shifts. That doesn't happen naturally. And more interestingly, he zoomed in on a heat scan. This isn't just rock. Something down there is generating power. Callie stared at the screen. What kind of power? Unknown, Rafik whispered. But it's definitely not geothermal or tectonic. And someone has tried very hard to keep this hidden. She was starting to understand, the land her family had mocked, the land everyone dismissed, was more than just dry soil. It was a vault. A secret protected not just by nature, but by her grandfather's stubborn foresight. The name The Spine wasn't poetic, it was literal. And someone wanted it buried. Suddenly, strange things began happening. An official-looking letter arrived claiming her property was in violation of several outdated environmental codes, codes that no longer existed. Then came a visit from inspectors who refused to identify their agency. Her truck was tampered with. Then a small fire broke out in the storage shed behind the main house. No source found. No one blamed. Callie filed reports. Nothing came of them. The message was clear: sell, or suffer. But Callie Monroe didn't scare easily. She wasn't just her grandfather's Aaron name, she was his mirror in grit. One evening, flipping through her grandfather's old field journal, she found a sketched map. A location marked only by 3 words: solstice. Noon. Watch. Below it, the coordinates of a rocky outcrop she vaguely remembered as a child, a strange curved rock that cast odd shadows at midday. That was when she knew where to go next. The land wasn't worthless. It was waiting. The desert sun was merciless on the summer solstice. It blazed high above the hills of Dustmere Valley, baking the red clay earth into brittle slabs. The heat shimmered off the rocks in waves, and the wind had long since retreated, leaving only the low hum of silence, deep, ancient, and unbroken. Callie Monroe stood at the edge of Zone 3, a backpack strapped tight to her shoulders, her grandfather's worn leather journal clutched in one hand. She had followed the coordinates precisely, hiking past broken fences and dried creek beds, through a twisted path of crumbling rock spines that gave the area its name. At last, she reached it. The arch. It wasn't large, perhaps 7 feet tall and just wide enough for a grown person to walk through. Made of a pale, striated stone she didn't recognize, it curved out of the earth like a gateway carved by time itself. Thorny brush and scorched sage surrounded its base, but even so, it stood unnaturally clean, untouched by bird droppings, wind-etched graffiti, or wear. Her grandfather had drawn it with almost reverent detail in the journal. A single page had been marked with a leather strip: on solstice noon, the shadow tells the truth. Now, with the sun directly overhead, Callie stepped back and watched. At first, there was nothing. The arch cast a crooked shadow onto the rocks, nothing more. But as the sun reached its zenith, something shifted. The jagged peaks nearby, the ones she had always assumed were just hide formations, suddenly aligned. Their shadows narrowed, sharpening like fingers pointing east. As they moved, they converged into a single arrow-like line that stretched across the desert floor and stopped directly at the arch. Callie's heart thudded. She moved toward the base, pushing aside brittle brush and crouching low. That's when she saw it, a glint of metal beneath a patch of gravel. She dropped to her knees and scraped away the earth with trembling hands. A door. Steel. Flush with the rock. Barely visible unless you were looking for it. Embedded in the center was a small, circular keyhole. From her pocket, she pulled out the old iron key, rusted, heavy, the one left in a sealed envelope marked "Only when you're ready." Her hands shook as she slid it in. Click. The door released with a quiet hiss of escaping air, and then a low grinding sound as gears, unseen and ancient, shifted beneath her. A faint draft rose from within, cool and dry. A square slab of the earth lifted upward like a hatch, revealing a narrow steel staircase that descended into pitch blackness. Before she could step forward, she heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel behind her. Spinning around, she was met by 2 figures in dark suits. Men, tall and impassive, with short cropped hair and expressions carved from stone. They both wore government IDs clipped to their jackets. The taller one spoke. "Ms. Monroe, we need to speak about your property." Callie's fingers curled instinctively around the key still in the lock. "We're authorized to offer you a substantial compensation," he continued. $50 million. Immediate transfer. No questions asked. She stared at him. "You're not here because of the land," she said slowly. "You're here because of what's under it." The shorter man stepped forward. "What's under there is classified at the highest levels. We've attempted to purchase this tract through legal means for decades. Your grandfather declined every time. Because he understood what was at stake," the taller man added. "And I think. So do you." Callie didn't move. She thought of the sabotage. The fake notices. The offers disguised as gifts. The smirks on her family's faces. Her ex-partner's dismissive tone. Her grandfather's firm voice echoing in her memory, "This land has secrets. Keep it safe until you understand." She nodded to herself. Then turned the key. The door lifted fully, revealing a narrow, spiraling metal staircase descending into dim light. She took one step in, flashlight in hand. The taller agent called after her, urgency rising in his voice. "You don't understand." "I will," Callie interrupted without turning back. "You can follow, or stay up here and wait." The two agents exchanged a glance, then followed her down. The air grew cooler the deeper they went. The walls transitioned from steel to a smooth, synthetic alloy that absorbed light. The flashlight's beam shimmered across strange materials embedded in the structure, thin veins of crystal laced through the walls, some pulsing faintly with a blue glow. Then they reached the bottom. A chamber, circular, 30 feet across, every surface gleaming with unfamiliar machinery. Consoles. Terminals. Tubes. Sealed vaults. This was no mine. It was a facility, quiet, humming, alive. "This isn't new," Callie whispered. "This has been here a long time. Since 1974, the shorter agent replied. "Your grandfather discovered a mineral sample during a private groundwater survey. He knew instantly what he'd found." "What was it?" The taller agent gestured to a cylindrical tank at the room's center, filled with a clear, almost glowing fluid. "Liquid helium-3, he said. "A rare isotope. Vital for clean nuclear fusion, quantum systems, advanced medicine. Practically non-existent on Earth. Worth millions per liter." Callie's knees nearly gave out. "How much is here?" The agent's voice was barely audible. "Over 400 million liters. The largest known reserve on the planet." She stumbled backward, staring at the tank, the walls, the consoles, the truth of what her grandfather had hidden, protected, nurtured. "Not a treasure, not a weapon, but a future. He partnered with us," the shorter agent said. "Under one condition, strict ethical oversight. No private companies. No unchecked military use. He insisted on transparency, even with us." Callie swallowed hard. "And now?" "Now, we offer you the same deal." She stared at them. These were men who had come to buy her silence, now speaking to her as a successor. "A partnership," the taller one added. "Not a buyout. You'll remain custodian. With full oversight. Full compensation. And final say." The moment hung heavy. Callie thought of her grandfather working alone for decades, guarding this place in secret. She thought of her family's cruelty, their greed. She thought of the world, torn by power, desperate for progress, hungry for energy. And then she thought of her purpose. This wasn't about revenge. This was about legacy. Callie Monroe took a breath. And said, "Then let's talk terms." The old ranch house hadn't changed much since the last time Callie's family gathered there, its whitewashed walls sun-peeled, its wooden beams creaking under the weight of time. Only now, it wasn't just a relic in the middle of nowhere. It was the headquarters of something far greater, far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Callie stood in the dining room, arms crossed, the dry wind from the open window brushing against her face. Dust motes drifted lazily in the golden afternoon light, and in the quiet moments before the storm, she could almost hear her grandfather's voice again, "You'll know what to do when the time comes." The time had come. They arrived in waves. First was Uncle Roy, trying not to look impressed as he stepped out of a black SUV, his signature smirk locked in place. He wore a pressed linen suit, completely out of place in the dusty valley. Then came Aunt Lila, flanked by her two adult children, Mallory and Vince, all clad in corporate black as if attending a board meeting instead of a family gathering. Even Glenn, her former partner, showed up, arms folded, eyes skeptical. They filed into the ranch house like they were expecting a negotiation. Like they still thought she was out of her depth. Callie greeted them all with a calm, polite nod. She had spent the last week preparing, finalizing legal protections, reviewing contracts with government lawyers, and personally drafting the statement she was about to deliver. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady. "So, Uncle Roy said, folding his arms, have you finally come to your senses? Ready to cut a deal and put this whole dusty mess behind you?" Lila chimed in with false sympathy, "We know how overwhelming this must be, honey. The taxes alone." Callie raised a hand. "There's been a development," she said. "A partnership." "A partnership?" Vince scoffed. "With who? Another failed cattle operation? Some green startup?" Callie didn't flinch. Instead, she reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila folder, its front stamped with a formal black seal and partially redacted headers. "This is a government agreement. Federal level. Strategic Research and Energy Development." She laid it flat on the table. "And I'm the primary oversight partner." Silence gripped the room. Mallory snatched up the folder, flipping through the pages. "These black dot sections, this doesn't even say what it's about." "It's classified," Callie said coolly. "But what I can tell you is that this land is now considered a site of national interest. And contrary to popular family belief, it's worth far more than anyone ever imagined." Glenn leaned forward. "You mean to say the government is paying you?" Callie smiled faintly. "Let's just say the arrangement ensures long-term revenue that'll make taxes, repairs, and offers like Uncle Roy's irrelevant." Roy's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You're bluffing." As if on cue, the front door creaked open again. Two sharply dressed individuals stepped inside, Agent Keene and Agent Ortiz, the very same federal officials who had first revealed the secret of Zone 3. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The glint of their official ID badges was enough to drain the color from Roy's face. "Ms. Monroe," Agent Keene said with practiced formality. "The survey team is waiting. We're ready to begin as scheduled." "Thank you," Callie replied. She turned back to her family. "I wanted you here because this is the last time we'll speak as equals. From this point forward, access to the land will be restricted. I'm establishing a trust to protect the property, and all inquiries, business or personal, will go through legal counsel. No more drop-ins. No more shady offers. No more manipulation." "You're cutting us out?" Lila gasped, stunned. "You cut yourselves out when you mocked what Grandpa built, when you laughed at me for trying to understand it. And now that I have, it's mine to protect." Glenn shook his head, still refusing to believe it. "You don't know what you're getting into, Cal. Government contracts? You think you'll be in control?" "I am in control," she said, voice steel hard. "And I'll remain so, because this was never just about money. Grandpa trusted me to safeguard this. And I intend to honor that trust." Roy slammed a hand on the table. "You're not qualified to manage this. You'll ruin it." Agent Ortiz calmly stepped forward. "Mr. Monroe, with all due respect, Ms. Callie Monroe has passed every necessary clearance and oversight protocol. She is fully authorized to serve as joint custodian. Further interference will be viewed as obstruction of federal partnership terms." That shut him up. Callie exhaled slowly. This confrontation, this moment, it wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming the legacy everyone had dismissed. It was about restoring what her grandfather had safeguarded alone for decades. She picked up the folder and tucked it under her arm. "I have a survey to attend," she said simply. "The agents will show you out. There's bottled water on the porch. The road out's the same one you came in." One by one, they filed out, angry, stunned, or simply embarrassed. Even Glenn couldn't meet her gaze. In that silence, the victory tasted like cool water in the desert, subtle, satisfying, and long overdue. Later that week, the transition began in earnest. A dozen plane trucks arrived at the property bearing nondescript logos for a solar initiative, the official cover story for what was, in reality, a helium-3 containment and research facility. The entrance near the arch was retrofitted with biometric locks, satellite uplinks, and a cloaked perimeter. Surveillance drones began patrolling the ridge lines. Callie oversaw it all from a new control room constructed beneath the ranch house itself. Every file she signed. Every log she verified. She was no figurehead. The agents tried to run things by protocol, but they learned quickly. Callie Monroe knew how to ask questions. She had the mind of a scientist and the intuition of a farmer's daughter. She didn't just want to protect the project. She wanted to understand it, to shape how it would be used. She read through papers from Grandpa's old correspondences, his notes on energy ethics, on global equity, on resource responsibility. He hadn't just hidden a treasure. He had shielded the future from greed. Callie made a vow that day, no matter how many zeros were added to the value of this land, she would never let it fall into the wrong hands. Not private corporations. Not opportunists. Not even family. She didn't inherit the land. She inherited a responsibility. And she would carry it farther than anyone had imagined. The press never got wind of it. No front page headlines. No evening broadcasts. Just a few vague mentions of a new federal solar initiative in Nevada's Dustmere Valley, and even those quickly disappeared into the noise of a chaotic world. But Callie Monroe's world was anything but quiet. In the months following her confrontation at the ranch house, the storm arrived in full force. Not from strangers, but from the very people who once dismissed her. It started with Roy. He filed a formal challenge to Nathaniel Monroe's will in a Nevada probate court, citing mental decline and manipulation by the heir. A tired, obvious move, desperate. Callie didn't blink. The moment her legal team, supported quietly by federal counsel, submitted a response backed by decades of documented mental health evaluations and a video of her grandfather explaining his decisions, the case was dismissed within hours. Then came the smear campaign. Local blogs with suspiciously similar wording published op-eds questioning Callie's sudden rise to influence. Some claimed she was in over her head, others suggested she had cozied up to federal authorities for personal gain. Even a few anonymous letters arrived at her mailbox accusing her of betraying her family for power. Callie kept them all. She never responded. She had more important things to do. Because while her family and the public were busy spinning stories, she was inside a research facility buried beneath the desert floor, helping shape the most important energy project of the century. The Department of Energy had assigned her a full-time liaison, Dr. Lena Moreau, a French-American physicist who had once led a quantum propulsion project in Geneva. Lena didn't treat Callie like a figurehead. She treated her like a partner. Together, they reviewed every inch of the facility's design, every stage of extraction, and the preliminary results of the helium-3 refinement protocols. The implications were staggering. The isotope, nearly non-existent elsewhere on Earth, was proving to be the holy grail of clean fusion energy. With it, entire cities could be powered without radioactive waste or fossil fuels. Its applications in medical imaging, satellite propulsion, and quantum computing opened doors no one had dared consider. And it was all beneath Callie's feet. But access came with responsibility. She chaired the ethics board herself, a panel that included scientists, engineers, military consultants, and environmentalists. Every project was scrutinized. Every application debated. Callie fought hard to ensure Nathaniel's vision remained intact: no privatization, no exploitation, no shortcuts. Power doesn't corrupt, her grandfather once wrote in a letter she found buried beneath a drawer in his study. It reveals. Be the mirror that makes them see themselves clearly. That line stayed with her. Especially when Glenn came back. Not with apologies. Not with humility. But with a business proposal. He arrived in a new suit, driving a luxury car he likely couldn't afford, claiming he'd found a firm interested in renewable partnerships and that he could broker a deal. He spoke in the language of money, as if throwing enough zeros at her would make her forget everything he once said. I don't think you understand what's at stake here, he said, leaning across her portrailing, voice low. "No, Glenn," Callie replied, "I don't think you understand what this land is. And you never did." He left, offended and empty-handed. That same week, Roy tried again, this time pushing a media narrative that Callie had uncovered a valuable natural resource and was keeping it secret. The headline hinted at environmental concerns, questioning whether the project was safe for nearby communities. Of course, there were no nearby communities, just empty desert. But the story grew traction. Callie's federal partners advised caution. The more noise the family stirred, the more risk there was of a leak. "You always have the option to walk away," Lena told her gently one evening, as they stood atop a lookout platform watching the sun vanish into a fire-colored horizon. "You've done enough already. We can take it from here." Callie shook her head. "They already tried to take this once. My grandfather kept it safe for 40 years. If I leave now, I'm not honoring that. I'm escaping it." She stayed. And paid the price. Her personal life all but evaporated. Former friends avoided her. Some claimed she was different now, others feared being associated with something top secret. Even a man she'd briefly dated ghosted her after asking one too many questions about the solar initiative. But she didn't regret it. Because every morning, she woke up in the old ranch house, restored but not renovated, and watched the sun spill over a land the world once called useless. And every afternoon, beneath that same ground, she oversaw a project that could change the course of human history. Still, the burdens of power were heavy. There were hard decisions. A foreign firm tried to hack the facility's firewall data core. They were caught early, traced, and quietly sanctioned. A rogue employee had attempted to leak project blueprints to an offshore investor. Callie was the one who spotted the discrepancy in access logs. She fired him personally. But through it all, she held fast. Because she remembered the way Roy's voice trembled when he realized he'd lost. The look in Glenn's eyes when he finally saw she was serious. The way Lila's laughter turned to stammering silence. More importantly, she remembered what Nathaniel said in his last letter. "Real wealth isn't measured in what you keep, it's measured in what you protect. And who you become in the process." So when a new offer came, this time from a global think tank backed by multinational funding, Callie didn't hesitate. She deleted the email. And got back to work. The air in Dustmere Valley had a way of whispering in the evenings, like it was trying to speak through the rustle of sagebrush and the low creak of old wooden fences. Callie Monroe sat on the front porch of the ranch house, the same one where her grandfather once drank his black coffee at dawn, boots crossed, eyes squinting at the sunrise. Now it was hers, and the land beyond it, stretching further than the eye could see, hummed with a future no one else had imagined. A government helicopter passed in the distance, masked as a monitoring flight for the solar research facility that didn't actually harvest a single watt of sunlight. Beneath those mirrored panels and sandy ridges, the helium-3 extraction facility thrived in secret, a monumental experiment quietly reshaping the energy blueprint of the world. And at its center stood Callie. It had been a year since she turned that key under the arch and unlocked more than just a steel door. Since then, her life had become a balancing act between confidentiality and consequence, oversight and opportunity. The government had kept its word: transparency, ethical control, and joint decision-making. She chaired the Ethics Council herself. Every application for helium-3 use, be it for clean energy reactors, advanced medical imaging devices, or quantum research, crossed her desk. She personally vetoed several projects that didn't meet the moral framework Nathaniel Monroe had left behind in his final letters. She wasn't just guarding a resource. She was guarding intent. That night, a courier drone dropped off a small, sealed package. No name. Just a familiar wax seal, NM. Her heart caught in her throat. She carried the package inside, hands shaking slightly, and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, crisp, strong strokes, slightly shaky near the end but still clear. Dear Callie. By now, you've likely seen the truth. I always knew you would. But I want you to know something even deeper than the secret beneath the land. I didn't choose you because you were my only grandchild. I chose you because you never walked away. You asked questions when no one else cared to listen. You looked closer when the world shrugged. You believed in something without needing it to be profitable, popular, or proven. Helium-3 is valuable, yes. But it's not the true treasure. The real inheritance is the strength to stand firm. The ability to protect something not for yourself, but for what it could become in the right hands. This land was my test. You passed it better than I ever could have. Love, Grandpa Nathaniel. Callie pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. All the long nights. The silence from old friends. The lawsuits, the threats, the doubts. They were worth it. She walked outside barefoot, the cool desert floor grounding her. The night sky above Dustmere was unblemished, a velvet dome pierced by countless stars. Somewhere far below, teams of scientists were working under her authority, quiet, careful, brilliant minds entrusted with humanity's next leap forward. But up here, it was still just the land. Raw. Wild. Unchanged. And that was the paradox, the land that had always looked worthless had, in fact, become priceless not because someone transformed it, but because someone preserved it long enough for the truth to be revealed. She thought about Roy's latest attempt, this time, trying to petition a state senator to reclaim private lands for public use. It failed, of course. The land was already public in spirit, it just wasn't accessible to the greedy. Glenn had finally stopped trying to reach her. She suspected the last email he sent, the one simply titled "We Could Have Done This Together," was left unread on purpose. That chapter was over. It had closed the moment he doubted her before she ever had the chance to believe in herself. Now, the world was starting to feel the ripples. Small mentions began appearing in classified research circles. Whispers about a new breakthrough in fusion energy. Hospitals requesting partnerships for imaging devices that could scan in ways never before possible. A few high-level figures in science and policy had begun referring to the spine protocol in confidential meetings. Callie never sought credit. But she made sure the land, and what it represented, was always protected. She even created scholarships in her grandfather's name, funds that would help young geologists, environmental engineers, and energy ethics scholars pursue paths that weren't guided by profit, but by purpose. The first letter of acceptance from a student at Northern Nevada University made her cry. One morning, nearly a year to the day of her discovery, she hosted a closed-door summit at the ranch house. Representatives from energy research agencies, medical boards, and ethical technology firms gathered around the same wooden table where her family once laughed at her. This time, the room was filled with reverent silence. She opened the meeting with a single sentence. "We don't get to choose the land we inherit. But we do get to choose the legacy we build on it." And they listened. They listened because she hadn't just found something rare. She had become something rare. Later that week, another offer came. This time, it was from a global conglomerate seeking collaborative access to renewable energy innovations. The message was sleek, polished, full of language about shared goals and mutual progress. Callie didn't bother reading past the first paragraph. She archived it with the others. Then she went out to the porch, coffee in hand, watching the dawn bloom across Dustmere Valley like it always had, quiet, undemanding, infinite. The wind shifted, and for a moment, she swore she could hear her grandfather's voice on it. It was never about the money, Emmy. It was about you becoming the one who could protect what others never saw. Epilogue. If you asked the world, the land out there still looked the same, just sand and rocks and whispering wind. If you looked at satellite maps, it was still marked as a low-density zone. If you visited, you'd see solar panels and a few scattered trucks. Nothing extraordinary. But beneath the surface? Power. Potential. Purpose. And a woman who proved that sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't winning, it's becoming the person no one thought you could be. She was once underestimated. Now she was unstoppable. Because the real treasure wasn't helium-3. It was Callie Monroe.